طيب الحمد لله رب العالمين صلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Just want to check online. Can you guys hear online on the WizIQ? Okay, ممتاز. طيب. So let's start, يا شباب. We'll start with the third chapter. And this chapter, the Sheikh al-Imam, he entitles it باب من حقق التوحيد دخل الجنة بلا حساب ولا عذاب. So he entitled it من حقق التوحيد دخل الجنة بلا حساب ولا عذاب. The chapter, the one who actualizes or realizes at-Tawhid will enter paradise without reckoning. Chapter. The one who actualizes or realizes at-Tawhid will enter paradise without reckoning. So if you remember, the Imam, when he started the book, he started with the chapter which we said could be entitled Babu Wujub at-Tawhid al-A'yan. The chapter which clarifies the mandatory or the required nature of a Tawhid on al-A'yan. Individuals, whether they be jinn or men. And he gave all that adillah so he would teach us and educate us that, look, Tawhid is not something optional. Tawhid is something that everybody has to observe. You have to do it. It's a requirement. And that should give us incentive to follow it or to apply it, to observe it, because if something is obligatory and we believe in Allah, we want to please Allah, then we will want to what? To do it. So that was the first incentive he gave us. It's obligatory. If you believe in God, you'll do it because you want to do what he requires you to do. Then after that he brought the chapter in which he said, Babu Fadl at-Tawhid وَمَا يُكَفِّرُ مِنَ الذُّنُوبِ. He brought the chapter where he clarified the virtue, the merit, the excellence of at-Tawhid and what it expiates of sins. So now, it's not just you have to do it, O Muslim. But if you do it, you stand to what? To gain a lot from Allah. You're going to get a lot. So this should even motivate you even more, give you more motivation and incentive to observe at-Tawhid because of what Allah is going to give you if you observe it. Now he brings a chapter where he says, not only should you observe it because you have to, and because of what you stand to gain, but you need to know, O Muslim, if you go beyond the bare minimum of just observing at-Tawhid, and you become one of the people who what? They excel in their monotheism. They excel in their observing and their practicing and implementing Allah's oneness in their life. If you become one of these people and distinguish yourselves from the average monotheist, you go beyond that, not only will you be obeying Allah, not only will you get these virtues that we mentioned, but you will enter paradise without reckoning and without punishment, which is something he didn't promise to what? The ordinary monotheist. The ordinary monotheist, he didn't promise it. He didn't promise them that. But he does promise it to who? Muhaqqiqi at-Tawhid, the people who they actualize and they realize it. So that's why he brings this chapter now. So we go beyond just being people of Tawhid to being people who what? Who actualize and realize it, and we get this additional reward that Allah didn't promise to the average monotheist. So if you notice, the word he uses to express this is the word tahqiq. Man haqqaq at-Tawhid. He uses the word tahqiq. طيب at-Tahqiq, we could translate it as they achieve it, they realize it, they fulfill it. That's the way we could translate it. But it carries the meaning, this word tahqiq, it carries a meaning and has the implication of at-takhlis, which is purification, and at-tasfiyah, which is refining. Which means that the person who hasn't achieved at-tahqiq, he might be a monotheist, he might be a person who believes in Allah's oneness and tries to observe it, But that doesn't prevent his tawheed from having what? From having shawa'ib, from having impurities. Fahimtum ya ikhwani? He could have some shortcomings in his tawheed, and some shortcomings in his tawheed which basically are impurities, some minor shirk that prevents his tawheed from being what? 100% khalis. You know how they say, for example, 99.9% pure, 98% pure. So he has a tawheed, and he's doing well in tawheed, but not what? Completely well. His tawheed is in need of what? At-takhlis, purification, what? Tasfiyah, refinement. If he does that, then he becomes what? Min muhaqqiqiyyat tawheed, from the people who what? They have achieved a tawheed. They have arrived when it comes to a tawheed. You guys follow me? You make sense? And this tahqiq, this level of a tawheed, of tahqiqing, or achieving a tawheed, is actually two levels. It's actually two levels. The first level is a tahqiq al-wajib. The tahqiq, which is mandatory, it's required. Every Muslim has to do what? Has to observe this level of a tawheed to be what? To be a Muslim, to be a monotheist. And that means that he does the required acts which necessitate, or which comprise the tawheed, and he avoids the muharramat, the prohibited things which violate a tawheed. And that would be what? The bare minimum that he would have to attain to be what? To be a muhaqqiq, to be a person who achieved the tawheed. The second level is a tahqiq al-mustahab, the recommended tahqiq, the recommended fulfillment or achievement, which means that he goes beyond just doing the required. He goes beyond just avoiding the prohibited. And he does what? He observes the things which are recommended. And he avoids the things which are disliked but not totally prohibited. So these are the two levels of a tahqiq. One is a tahqiq al-wajib, the required, minimum requirement. Everybody has to do. Walaikum salam. And the second one, the one which is recommended, which is a level above. So now, when we come across those instances where the Imam refers to a tahqiq, sometimes it's going to be a tahqiq al-wajib, sometimes it's going to be tahqiq al-mustahab, and we have to basically use our intellect to figure out which one he intends. Is it clear so far, or do I need to review something? Is there anything that is not clear that you want to ask a question about? Feel free. Let's see, I think we might have one from online. طيب, do you guys have a question online? Mumtaz, it's clear. طيب. All right. So now, what the author is going to do now, the Sheikh, he's going to mention three adillah, three proof texts, to support the title that he gave. What was the title he said? He said, Bab man haqqaq tawheed dakhal al-jannata bila hisab wala adhab. The chapter, the one who actualizes a tawheed will enter paradise without reckoning or punishment. So now he's going to bring his proof to support his claim. He's claiming that if you achieve a tawheed, you'll enter paradise without what? Reckoning or punishment. So the first dalil he brings, the first proof text he brings, he wants to cite an example. He wants to cite an example of what? Of a muhaqqiq, of a person who achieved a tawheed. He achieved, fulfilled, realized a tawheed, and the qualities that he exemplified. And why does he do that? He does that because this way we ourselves can recognize when we have what? When we have achieved a tawheed. These qualities will give us what? A mi'yar, give us a gauge by which we can know if we have these qualities, if we exemplify these qualities like this muhaqqiq li-tawheed exemplified them, then we ourselves will be from what? Muhaqqiqi at-Tawhid. Because it doesn't do us any good to know that the people who do this will get paradise unless we try to do it ourselves and we have a way to what? To gauge whether we did it or not. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? Fine. So what the Imam is going to do is going to give us an example. Now I'm going to ask you, if somebody asked you, who is the golden standard, the quintessential example of a Tawhid? طيب الرسول Ibrahim. Ibrahim. So he's going to bring the example of who? Ibrahim. The golden standard and quintessential example of what? Of a Tawhid, of a muwahid. Not just a muwahid, but someone who what? Haqqa a Tawhid. Somebody who achieved and realized a Tawhid. And he's going to mention 4 qualities, or he's going to mention an ayah where Allah mentions 4 qualities that Ibrahim had. So in the ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says, Inna Ibrahima kana ummah, qanitan lillahi hanifan, wa lam yaku min al-mushrikeen. So in this ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes Ibrahim with 4 qualities. He says, verily Ibrahim was an ummah, a qanit, a hanif, and he was not from those who ascribe partners to Allah. So the first quality he mentioned is kana ummah. He was an ummah. Now normally we would translate ummah, how would we translate ummah normally? Under normal circumstances?
Probably nation.
Nation, community. Nation, community. And in fact you'll find some of the translators, when they translate this, they'll say Ibrahim was a nation unto himself, or a community unto himself. And I'm not saying that's a bad translation, but in reality, when Allah says ummah here, He means imamun fil khair. Imamun fil khair. He means that Ibrahim was a leader and a model in good and doing good. He was a front runner, a pioneer in doing good and being good. And what this teaches us is that from a tahqiq, from achieving a tawheed, is that a person who, if he has tawheed in his heart, he shouldn't think that tawheed is something we believe and something in the heart. Nah. When a person has achieved the tawheed, that will translate into what? Into action. It will manifest itself on his limbs and cause him to do what? Good. Not just good, but lots of good. And become a front runner and an example for other people in good. So that's the first quality of a muhaqqiq al-tawheed that we can use as a gauge of ourselves. Am I muhaqqiq al-tawheed? Am I a good doer? Not just a good doer, but a person who races to do good, outstrips other people in doing good, such that I'm a model for them. They look to me to see what are the good things people should be doing. Waati akhwan, does that make sense? So that's the first quality of Ibrahim. Ummatun fil khair, or imamun fil khair. طيب, the second one, qanit. Qanit, al-qunut, it means al-mudawama al-khair. It means what? A person does what? They're constantly and consistently doing, al-mudawama ala ta'atillah. They're constantly and consistently obedient to Allah. Constantly and consistently. So another quality of Ibrahim is that he was what? He was always obedient, consistently, unwaveringly obedient to Allah. So that tells us another quality of the one who achieved the tawheed is that not only does he do good, but he's a person who consistently obeys Allah and seldom disobeys Allah. And so this is another gauge that we can use. If we're muhaqqiqi al-tawheed, then we're going to be people who what? Obey Allah a lot. That tawheed in our heart, that azama, that ta'zeem lillah, that greatness that we feel for, that greatness of Allah that we feel in our hearts is going to translate itself into what? Into keeping us from disobeying Him. Like the famous statement of the Salaf that they said, لا تنظر إلى السر المعصية. Don't look at whether the sin is major or minor. بل انظر إلى عظمة من تعصي. Rather look at the greatness of the one that you're disobeying. When you have that azama, the greatness of Allah in your heart, that does what? It restrains you from what? Disobeying Him. So this is another effect of what? Of a person achieving a tawheed. طيب, ثم بعد ذلك, he says Hanif. That Ibrahim was what? A Hanif. Hanif comes from the word al-hinth. And al-hinth in the language of the Arabs, it means al-iqbal. It basically means that you turn towards something. You face it. You move in its direction. You commit yourself to it. You devote yourself to it. And if you do that to anything, then what do you have to do consequently? What do you have to do consequently? If you turn, I'm going to give you a practical example. All right, here I am, I'm facing you, right? All right? Make sense? Now I'm going to do what? What's your name, brother? Abdurrahim. I'm going to do what? I'm going to turn down, سأقبل على Ibrahim. I'm going to do what? Turn towards and commit myself, devote myself to Ibrahim. So what do I have to do consequently?
Disregard the other stuff?
Yeah, I have to do what? I have to turn away from everyone else. I have to shun everyone else. So if Ibrahim was a muqbil al-Tawhid, if he turned himself and committed himself to a Tawhid, he had to shun, consequently, ماذا? Ashirk, at-Taghut, jazakallah khair. That he had to shun. So when Allah says Hanif, it means that Ibrahim was a person who committed himself to a Tawhid, and simultaneously, consequently, he turned himself away from what? From a shirk, wholly, completely. From what? From the false deities. So there's another quality of Ibrahim. He was what? A person who what? Purified. He was a pure monotheist, and his Tawhid had no shawa'ib. It had no impurities of what? Of a shirk. And he was totally devoted to what? To a Tawhid. Then on top of that, Allah mentions a fourth quality. He says, and he was not from those who ascribe partners to Allah. So it wasn't just that Ibrahim was a muwahhid, a pure monotheist, but his love for Allah and his firm belief in his oneness caused him to what? To despise and hate the people who do what? Who associate partners with Allah. And so he did what? He disassociated himself with them and refused to keep company with them. And that's what Allah means when he says he wasn't from them. Meaning he didn't what? He didn't associate with them. He disassociated himself from what? Al-mushrikun. So these are four qualities that we can use as a gauge to tell ourselves, are we from muhaqqiqi at-Tawhid? First one, a leader, a model, a front runner in doing good. Two, qanat, devoutly obedient to Allah. Three, hanif, muqbil al-Tawhid, wa ma'il an al-shirk, mu'rid an al-shirk. And last, us disassociating ourselves from what? From the pagans and the idolaters and the people of a shirk. But ثم بعد ذلك, he's going to bring now his second proof. Second proof. And that's another ayah in which he says, or he brings the ayah in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَالَّذِينَ هُمْ بِرَبِّهِمْ لَا يُشْرِكُونَ. So it's almost as if he's repeating the same information that he said previously, giving another quality for the muhaqqiqeen, the people who achieve a tawheed, but it seems like it's one of the ones he already mentioned for who? For Ibrahim. So is it just being repetitive? La wallah. Too loud? Fine.
هندسة الصوت تصوير.
الله يجزاك خير.
تذكر ويفوز
الله يجزاك خير. الله يجزاك خير. طيب. So he cites a quality, the Shaykh, the Imam, he cites a quality that it seems as if he previously mentioned it. So it almost seems like it's what? Being repetitive. But it's not necessarily repetitive without purpose. So yes, he's basically saying that one of the qualities of the muhaqqiqeen of Tawheed is that they what? They avoid a shirk. They're not people who associate partners with Allah. But the reason why this is beneficial for him to mention it with this ayah in this way is three reasons. One, for emphasis. There's a question here, one second. What's the question, Mujab? Let me see. Yeah, that's right. I see it now. So turn away from what opposes it. So if you say Hanif, then he's going to be a muqbil. He's going to be a turner towards something. And if he turns towards something, consequently, he has to turn away from something else. So if we say he's muqbil al-Tawhid, he turned toward and committed himself to a Tawhid, then consequently, huwa mu'rid an-shirk. He turned away from a shirk. Alright, mumtaz. طيب. So the first reason why he mentioned it, again, seemingly, is to emphasize it. Emphasize it because, wallahi ikhwani, this is the asl, this is the fundamental ingredient of a tahqiq. If you want to achieve a tawheed, the first thing you have to do is what? Is to avoid what? A shirk. It's just like if you want to make a cake, what's the first thing you have to have? The main thing you have to have? Flour. And you can have all the other ingredients, but if you don't have flour, you're not going to make a cake. You agree with me? I can get rid of the sugar. It's going to be nasty. It's not going to be a good tasting cake, but I can make a cake. Right? I can get rid of the yeast. It's not going to rise. It's going to be a flat cake, but it'll be a cake. But I can have yeast and eggs and sugar and milk and vanilla, artificial vanilla. If I don't have flour, I'm not going to have what? Cake. Make sense? Like, Mumtaz. I know some sisters are laughing like, that's not how you make a cake. He left out a bunch of stuff. But you guys get the point. Like, all right. The second thing, or the second reason, is that he wanted to indicate that this quality of avoiding a shirk is not specific to who? Ibrahim. He doesn't want you to think that Ibrahim is the only one who what? Who made this point to, because some people, they almost think like a tawheed, and the emphasis on tawheed is something new. Something that was made up by certain contemporaries. That they're the ones who make this big emphasis on this, and people before that, tawheed was not really that important. To the point that they'll say things like, you can study tawheed in 10 minutes. It's not important. Why do people emphasize it? But the fact of the matter is that not only was Ibrahim a Hanif, a person who turned toward the tawheed and shunned a shirk, but this was the case for all of what? The prophets and messengers. That's why it says, وَالَّذِينَ هُمْ بِرَبِّهِمْ. Those who. It wasn't just Ibrahim, but what? It was all the prophets and messengers, right? And not only this, they avoided idolatry, shirk in all of its forms and levels, all of its degrees. It was a big emphasis for what? All of the prophets, not just Ibrahim. Then the third reason he mentioned it is to emphasize that this is, as we mentioned earlier, that this is the fundamental. This is the primary ingredient. This is the cornerstone to what? Tahqiq, achieving a tawheed. That a person avoids what? Strictly avoids a shirk in all of its forms, which means a person has to know what a shirk is. It's like the poet, he said, عرفت الشر لا للشر ولكن لتواقيه ومن لم يعرف الشر وقع فيه. He said, I learned about evil, not for the sake of evil, but to avoid it. And whoever doesn't know evil will do what? Will fall into it. So we have to learn what is a shirk so we can avoid it. Like, any questions at this point? Because we have one more dalil, the last dalil that he brings. It's a long one. Any other questions? Any questions? تفضلوا. في شيء? Like, all right, so now at this point, all that we've heard is qualities, features, things that we can use to gauge whether or not we have achieved the tawheed or realized it or not. But up to this point, we haven't seen the dalil, the proof, that the one who achieves it will do what? Will enter paradise without reckoning or punishment. So the question comes, okay, where's the dalil for this? Where's the proof for this? He's going to mention it now. And it's a long hadith. It's a long hadith that he mentions that provides proof, and it has a lot of fawaid. So what I'm going to do, to save time, I'm going to read it in English, and I'll stop at the places where I think we want to make some commentary to clarify. Okay, does that make sense, Shabab? So we won't say it in Arabic, we'll read it in English, and then we'll make commentary where necessary. طيب. So the hadith was reported by Hussein ibn Abdul Rahman, and he said, I was with Sa'id ibn Jubair. Sa'id ibn Jubair, one of the famous tabi'een, right? I was with Sa'id ibn Jubair, and he asked, who among you saw the shooting star last night? Okay? I answered, this is Hussein. Hussein, he says, I answered that I had seen it, and I explained to him that I had not been praying at the time when I saw it. So basically, at night, we're talking maybe like between midnight and Fajr. You guys with me? Between midnight and Fajr, there was a shooting star on the previous night. The next morning, Sa'id ibn Jubair, he gets with what? His companions, students. And he asked them, which one of you saw the shooting star last night? Hussein, one of his students, he says, I saw it, but I wasn't praying. I saw it, but I wasn't praying. Praying what? At-Tahajjud, the night prayer. And there's a fa'idah here. The first fa'idah is that from the distinguishing characteristics of our predecessors, a Salaf, is that they dislike to be praised undeservedly. They dislike to be praised undeservedly. Where do we get that from? Where do we get that from? That they don't like to be praised when they don't deserve to be praised. They don't like to be praised for something they haven't done. Where do you get that? Where do we see that in this hadith?
He said that he wasn't praying.
He says, I saw it, but I wasn't. I don't want you to think I was praying. I don't want you to think, oh, mashallah, he must have been up praying and that's when he saw it. That's what you're going to think. I don't want you to think that because I wasn't. You follow me? They don't like to be praised undeservedly. Look at that. Look at the piety. Many of us nowadays, not any of you, inshallah ta'ala, but many people nowadays, they love to be praised for what they haven't done. Oh, mashallah. The brother memorized al-Bukhari. The brother memorized al-Bukhari. He memorized the whole book. And the person knows he hasn't memorized al-Bukhari. Do you think he would say so? You think he would say, no, wallahi, ya ikhwan, I studied it, but I haven't memorized it. Nah. He likes to be praised for what he hasn't done. Oh, mashallah, the brother memorized the Quran. He didn't memorize the Quran. He didn't memorize half of the Quran. But he loves to be praised for what he hasn't done. So he wouldn't correct the person and say, no, ya akhi, I memorized maybe thalathat ajza, just 3 parts of it. So the point is that the early Muslims, they hated to be praised for what they haven't done. If I don't want to be praised undeservedly. I haven't done it? No, I wasn't praying. The second fa'idah that we get from this is that also from the distinguishing characteristics is regular observance of the night prayer. Another thing that is distinguishing about a Salaf is that they regularly did what? They regularly prayed at night. Between midnight and Fajr, they would what? Pray regularly. How do we know this? From this hadith. How do we know it? Because Sa'id ibn Jubair, what did he say?
I wasn't praying.
Huh? Okay, he said I wasn't praying, which is good because he knew that that's Hussein. He knew that they would think, because normally that's what we do. Normally that's what we do, right? But also we know it from Sa'id, from his statement. Which one of you saw the shooting star? As if he expected you must have been up. If people normally sleep, how could they have seen it? So he expected they must have been up because that's what we usually do. We get up and we pray. This was their custom, their regular practice, to the point that they would visit each other. They would visit each other at this time and expect the person to be what? To be awake. Because people normally pray at this time. They're normally up. They're not sleeping at this time. And you notice nowadays how things have changed. Very few people pray at night, ya ikhwani. Although the early Muslims, who are our example, it was a regular practice to make some time for Allah at night. And it's the best time to cry to Allah, to make dua to Allah, to ask Allah for your needs. It's a time, the best time. And which one of us is seizing it? The hadith, it goes on. It says, he says, the reason why I was up, I wasn't praying, I had been stung by a scorpion. He asked, then what did you do? I replied, I used ruqya. I made ruqya. Ruqya is like an invocation, a supplication you make seeking what? Healing from Allah. Right? So he said, I used ruqya. So then Sa'id, he asked, وَمَا حَمَلَكَ عَلَى ذَلِكَ? And what caused you to do that? And then Hussein, he answered, a hadith I heard from a Sha'bi. So now there's another fa'idah here. And that is that another quality of the Salaf is talab al-dalil. Is asking for what? The evidence. Asking for the proof. That if you do something, I'm going to ask you, why do you do that? What's your dalil? You follow me? That's one of their guidance. People get annoyed when we do that nowadays. You say, yeah, I saw you doing this and I was just wondering, what's your dalil? What do you base that on? And people get annoyed, get upset, they get agitated. But not the early Muslims. The early Muslims would what? Ask for the dalil. And at the same time, they felt it necessary to have a dalil for everything they did. Which is why Hussein responded, I do have a dalil. It's what? A hadith which I memorized from Ash-Sha'bi. So from one angle, they would always ask for the dalil. And the other angle, they always felt necessary to what? To have a dalil. So we should be the same way, because they're our example. That whenever we do anything, ya ikhwan, we should be keen to what? To know the dalil. Why do I do this? Don't be a parrot. Don't, especially with your deen. I see people do it, I do the same thing. How many of us do that? We just see people do something and we like to, bring new things into our deen. We like to we want to break the monotony. Not do the same thing all the time. So when we see somebody do something a little bit different, we do like they do. Right? It's like you want to renovate your home, change the furniture, right? Because I'm tired of the same old living room. I want to change. No, we can't do the deen unless we have what? Proof. So for example, people will rise up from the bowing position and they'll do like this, right? And then they'll put their hands down. And you always do what? You bring your hands up and you put your hands down. You say, oh, look at that. That's a little different. I never done, that's a little twist I can add to my prayer. Yeah, but what's the dalil? We need to ask for what? The dalil. And the second thing is, if I'm doing this, I need to know what? What's the dalil? So that's another lesson we get from the hadith. I need to know what's the dalil. ثم بعد ذلك he mentions the hadith of Sha'bi. He said, it's the hadith I heard from Sha'bi in which he said, Sa'id asked, he said, well, what did he tell you? What's the hadith? I want to know the hadith. So then Hussein, he said, he reported from Burayd ibn Husayb, who said that Ruqya, he reported from Burayd ibn Husayb, there is no Ruqya, prayer for healing, except from the evil eye or from a poisonous sting. La ruqyata illa min aynin aw humma. He said there's no ruqya except from the evil eye or from a poisonous sting. Now, the literal meaning of this hadith tells you that the only time you can make ruqya is either you have what? The evil eye, you've been afflicted by the evil eye, or you have what? You have a poisonous sting. That's the only time you can use a ruqya. But that's not really what the hadith intends. That's not really what the meaning of the hadith is. The actual meaning of hadith is la ruqyata anfa' wa awla. No ruqya is more what? Is more beneficial and worthy of being offered than the one offered in these two instances. That the Prophet isn't telling you can only do it in these circumstances, but he's saying these are the best times, the best circumstances, the best instances to use a ruqya, but not the only ones. Why? Because we have so many evidences, so many examples where the Prophet used ruqya what? In other circumstances. So that tells us that when the Prophet said this, he didn't intend to prohibit ruqya in other circumstances, but just to stress that what? These are two of the best circumstances to use a ruqya. طيب ثم بعد ذلك Sa'id ibn Jubair, he responds, and he says, he who limits himself to what he has heard has done well. Meaning, because you followed the hadith, that's what? A good thing. But I have some additional information that I want to share with you that will give you clarity about what you just said. You follow me? So maybe you have an understanding, but I'm going to tell you something which will clarify your understanding and make it clear. So he says, but Ibn Abbas reported to us that the Prophet ﷺ, he said, "Uridat alayhi al-umam." All of the nations were passed before me, and I saw a prophet. وَرَأَيْتُ النَّبِيِّ وَمَاهُ الرَّهْطِ. I saw a prophet, and he had a small group of people with him. Meaning, these were basically the people who followed him in the world. And a rahat is like 3 to 10. A small group, a small band. Then he says, وَرَأَيْتُ النَّبِيِّ يَرْحَمُكَ اللَّهُ وَمَاهُ الرَّجُلُ or rajulan. He said, and I saw one prophet, he had 1 or 2 people with him. I can't recall, 1 or 2. I mean, small group of people, 1 or 2. وَرَأَيْتُ النَّبِيِّ وَلَيْسَ مَعَهُ أَحَدٌ. And I saw a prophet and he didn't have anybody with him. No one followed him. And there's a couple of lessons I'm going to mention out of Ujala here. The first one is that one should never be fooled by large numbers. We can never be fooled, ya ikhwani, by large numbers. Or consider that an indication that we're on the right path. Because, oh, look at all these people who are with me. Look at all the people who are in the group that I'm a part of. Also, we cannot be fooled into thinking that small numbers are an indication that the group is what? Is on falsehood. If I'm in a group and there's only a few of us, then oh, we must be on the falsehood. No. Or that group, because they have small numbers, they're on falsehood. La. Numbers don't mean anything because you have a prophet who had what? 3 to 10. Another prophet with 1 or 2. And another prophet with what? No follow. And all of them were on what? Haqq. All of them were on haqq without question. You follow me? So numbers should not be something which we use to say haqq or batil, truth or falsehood. The second thing is that when people refuse to follow the truth or follow the call, you call them to truth and they refuse it, that is not an indication of failure. You're a failure as a da'i because no one listens to you. You follow me? Just like a large following, lots of people who listen to you is not a mi'yar, not a sign of what? Success. So no one should think, oh, Ahmed Didat was such a great da'i because so many people listened to him, so many people followed him. You follow me? So many people were affected by him and they do da'wah the same way he does. They follow his path. Oh, people all over the world. So they think he's successful because of what he said or because of how many people followed him. No, not because of what he said, but because of how many. What did they say? They say Ahmed Didat was a successful da'i because what? Look at all the people. Look at all the people. So basically, when they say, how do they justify it? He was successful because all the people. They're using what? The number of people who followed him as a sign of what? Success. And then they might turn and say another da'i. They might say, oh, this da'i, he wasn't successful because very few people followed him. You follow me? So they use numbers as what? A sign of what? Success. La ya ikhwan. Success in da'wah should be measured by what? How correct the da'wah is. How correct what you say is, and the pleasure that you get from Allah for saying the correct thing. That's how we measure. Irrespective of what? How many people follow. Because these prophets, some of them, nobody followed them. But they were what? What they called to was what? Correct. And Allah was pleased with them. So we say they're what? Successful, even if no one ever followed them. Wahi ya ikhwan? ثم بعد ذلك, we come to the shahid. We come to the real point. So basically, the hadith goes on, and it says that I saw a prophet with a small group, a prophet who had no one with him, and then there was shown to me a large number of people, which I thought to be my ummah. But it was said to me, this is Musa and his people. Then I looked and saw a huge crowd, huge, larger than the one I had seen previously, the one that was said that this is the people of Musa. And then it was said to me, these are your people. This is your community, O Muhammad. And among them are 70,000 who will enter paradise without a reckoning or punishment. All right, and that's what that's the shahid. That's the point that the Imam was trying to make at the beginning of the book, at the beginning of the chapter. That this is the reward when we do what? When we achieve a tawhid. So there's the proof for it. But then it goes on to give an example, more evidence, not more evidence, but more qualities of the muhaqqiqeen at-Tawhid who achieve this virtue of entering paradise without punishment, reckoning or punishment. So the Prophet, after he said this, he told the companions, there's going to be 70,000 from my ummah who will enter paradise without reckoning or punishment. Immediately, what do you think the companions did?
They're from them?
Huh?
Are they from the 70,000?
They might have said, are we from them?
Yeah.
Okay, they might have wanted to know, are we from them? Or they may have wanted to know, what?
How do you become?
Mumtaz. What do you have to do? This just can't happen. They have to do something to earn that, right? So the Prophet, after he said this, he got up and went into his home. So he left them there to do what? To start speculating, right? They started speculating. So some of them, they said, perhaps they are the companions of Allah's messenger. And this is a problem, isn't it? He says, perhaps they are the companions of Allah's messenger. But who's saying this in the first place? The companions. And because of this, ya ikhwani, because the people who are saying this are companions, but they're saying perhaps, wa alaikum salam, perhaps the people who are going to get this reward are the companions. Some people, they say that the ta'rif that we typically use, the definition we typically use for a companion is not right. What do we typically say? Somebody says, well, who are the companions? We says, kullu man laqiya an-nabi mu'minan bihi wa mata ala dhalik. We say a companion, in the terminology of Islam, refers to every person who met the Prophet, not every person who what? Saw. Why don't we say saw? Because that would exclude who? The blind. And didn't the Prophet have blind companions? Yes. And weren't they his companions? So that's why they don't say ra'a, kullu man ra'a, everyone who saw. But they say kullu man laqiya, they met, to include the companions of the Prophet who were blind. Laqiya an-nabi mu'minan bihi, believing in him, to exclude who? The people who met him but they didn't believe. Wa mata ala dhalik, to exclude the people who what? They believed and then they apostated. Okay, so this is the definition that the scholars typically give for the companions. Tayyib, some people said, well, this definition isn't right, because in this hadith, people who they fulfilled all these conditions, they're saying what? Perhaps they were the companions, as if a companion is more specific and has more stipulations than just meeting the Prophet, believing in him, and dying on that. There's more to it. If you want to be a companion, it's a step above. You follow me? So now, this is an ishkal, this is an issue, and we want to address it really quickly before we conclude our discussion. So how do we answer this misconception that people have? That this hadith is telling us that that definition is not right. You follow me? So we answer by saying that this word, as-sahabi, in the Arabic language, it has what? It has three meanings, or three possible connotations or usages. That the word has been used in the language of the Arabs in three ways. You guys with me so far? It's been used in three ways. That the word companion, when it's used in the Arabic language, and even in some of the texts, it's used with three different meanings. So sometimes it's used with the meaning that we're talking about, that terminological meaning, and sometimes used with other meanings. And so we can't think that if we see it used in a different way that this meaning is not applicable, or it's what? It's false. You guys follow me so far? Makes sense or doesn't make sense? Makes sense, doesn't make sense, none of the above. Doesn't make sense. Okay, maybe it'll make sense. I'm going to clarify. And I want to tell you that this was mentioned by Ibn Taymiyyah in two books. One, Minhaj al-Sunnah, and the other one, Majmu' al-Fatawa. So he mentioned that there's three different connotations, three different usages for the word sahabi. The first one is al-ma'na al-lughawi, the linguistic meaning. That the word sahabi has what? A linguistic meaning, a word that's just used by the Arabs in what? In their language. And that's the original meaning. Then the second meaning is al-ma'na al-shar'i, the legal or the Islamic meaning. That Islam has given it a special meaning, just like salat. Salat in the language of the Arabs is what? Dua, supplication. But salat in the language of Islam is what? That specific prayer that we do with specific statements that we make and specific actions that we do. Make sense? So sahabi has a legal meaning, a shar'i meaning. And the last one, sahabi has what? A meaning which is urfi. It's customary. It has more to do with what? Custom. Okay? How people traditionally would use the word. You follow me? Does that make sense? It making more sense now? Okay. All right. So now, let me give you examples of each one. And then you tell me which one is being used in the hadith. When they said, لَعَلَّهُمْ أَصْحَابُهُ, right? Perhaps they are his companions. Which one? I'm gonna give you the three examples of the three, and then you tell me which one is the hadith, which one is being used in the hadith. So the first one we said was al-ma'na shay al-lughawi, the linguistic one. Linguistic meaning, it means mutlaq as-suhbah. It means general companionship. General companionship which may not exceed familiarity. General companionship may not exceed what? Familiar. I'm familiar with this guy. I know him. I know him, but I may not even like him. I don't associate with him, but I'm associated with him for factors beyond my control. For example, let's say you move to South Carolina from New York, okay? And somebody else moves to South Carolina from New York, and you work in the same plant, and you don't know each other. He's from Brooklyn, you're from the Bronx. Never met each other. He works in one part of the plant, you work in another part, and you just hear that what? There's a guy from New York who works in the plant, right? You guys have some meetings, and you see him in the meetings, but you don't interact, right? And somebody comes and they says, where's your man? Where's your companion? Meaning what? That guy from New York, the guy from your, who's from your city. I don't know him from Adam, but just because we're from the same city, they do what? They connect us and make us companions, even though we don't even get along. You follow me? Does that make sense? You say, where's your man? We say that all the time. Where's your man? And I don't even get along with that person. It's just like they would say in Arabic, Aina sahibuk, right? Where's your companion? Does that make sense? That's what we call what? Al-ma'na al-lughawi. And this meaning, we find it in the Quran. Allah says, addressing the kuffar, the mushrikun, who were fighting the Prophet, He says, وَمَا صَاحِبُكُمْ بِمَجْنُونَ. And your companion, Muhammad, is not what? Insane. Your companion is not insane. Is he their companion? Is he their friend? Is he their associate? No, they're enemies. But Allah is using it here with the meaning which is what? Linguistic. Right? You guys are associated. You're joined at the hip even though what? You don't want to be associated with each other. You're joined at the hip. Why? Because you're from the same city, same qabila. You follow? Does that make sense now, ya ikhwan? طيب, so that's the first meaning. المعنى اللغوي. طيب, ثم بعد ذلك we have المعنى الشرعي, the legal meaning, which is the meaning that we mentioned, that is mentioned by the scholars of Islam regardless of discipline. So you read the books of hadith and they say as-sahabi. Read the books of tafsir, as-sahabi. You read the books of lugha, as-sahabi. I don't care what the discipline is, you read the word sahabi. When these scholars mention the word sahabi, they mean what? That meaning we talked about before. كُلُّ مَنْ لَقِيَ النَّبِيَّ. Everybody who met the Prophet, مُؤْمِنًا بِهِ وَمَاتَ عَلَى ذَلِكَ. Believing in him and died upon that. Right? That's what they mean. The legal meaning. The meaning that Islam gave it when it came. Just like the meaning that Islam gave salat when it came is not dua, but gave what? That specific meaning of that prayer that we observe at least 5 times a day. Waadih ikhwan? طيب, what's an example of that? What's an example of that in the nusus? We have a hadith collected by Muslim on the authority of Abu Hurairah, in which the Prophet ﷺ, he said, وَدَدْتُ أَنِّي لَقِيتُ أَصْحَابِي. He said, وَدَدْتُ أَنِّي لَقِيتُ إِخْوَانِي. So the Prophet is with his companions, and he says, I wish that I could meet my brothers. فَقَالُوا أَلَسْنَا إِخْوَانَكَ Ya Rasulullah. Are we not your brothers? So the Prophet said, Antum ashabi. You are my companions. وَإِخْوَانِي أُنَاسٌ لَمْ يَأْتُوا بَعْدِ أو يَأْتُونَ بَعْدِ. They are the ones who will come after me, after my death. So what is the Prophet saying? The people who meet me and walk with me during my lifetime are called ashabi. And the people who come after I die are what? Ikhwani. They're excluded from what? That special group of people who had the pleasure and the privilege to meet and walk with me and believe in me during my lifetime. What, ikhwan? So this is which meaning? The legal meaning. Shari. طيب, ثم بعد ذلك comes to the last one, which we said was what? Al-urfi. The customary meaning. The meaning which is used customarily in custom tradition is how it's used. طيب, this one, it refers to now something which is a little bit more khas, something more specific and more specialized. It means what? Accompanying someone for an extended period of time. It's something we use with the meaning of accompanying someone for an extended period of time. And it refers to the one who has kept someone's company much longer than what? Than others. So you might have a group of people who keep the company of, what's your name, brother? Omar. They keep company with Omar. There's a group of them. Some of them have been keeping his company for 10 years. And some of them have been keeping his company for 2 years. You follow? You make sense? So now I have these two groups, 2 years and 10 years. And I say, these are the companions of Omar, not these. Why do I say that these are not his companions? Because relatively speaking, when we take one and compare it to the other, one group has what? Has spent more time with Omar than the others. So they have more right to be called companions than what? Than the others. Although in the linguistic meaning, definitely, in the Shar'i meaning, definitely, we could call them what? Ashab Umar, the companions of Umar. But in the customary meaning, we use it for what? The people who have been accompanying a person for the longest time, or an extended period of time. And we can negate companionship from those who haven't accompanied him and kept his company for that length of time. These people are what? These are his real companions. The people who what? Kept company with him for the longest time. Does that make sense? Like Mumtaz. What's an example of this? An example of this is also the hadith of Muslim authority Abu Hurairah, in which it's a famous hadith. Khalid bin Walid, when did he accept Islam? Approximate. You don't have to be exact. It's not a test. Did he accept Islam in the first year of Hijrah?
No.
More closer to the 8th year of Hijrah?
Yes.
Yeah, toward the end. Right? Toward the end. Alright? So Khalid bin Walid, would you say, and I'm saying this respectfully, because we never disrespect the companions. Would you say he was a latecomer? Would that be fair to say?
Yes, let's come.
Mumtaz. Alright.
He's not alone.
He's not alone, but he came, if you relatively speaking, he came later than what? Than people like Abu Bakr.
Yes, sir.
Abdurrahman ibn Auf.
Sure.
With me?
Sure.
Right, Mumtaz. Khalid bin Walid is in the presence of the Prophet ﷺ. In his presence, and he starts to have some type of disagreement with Abdurrahman ibn Auf, who's what? Who has some years under his belt as a companion of the Prophet. And Khalid says something derogatory to Abdurrahman ibn Auf. He insults him. And the Prophet said, "La tasubbu ashabi." Don't insult my companions. Whoa. What does that mean? Does that mean Khalid is a companion? La, doesn't mean he's not a companion mutlaqan, but you're not a companion like who? Like Abdurrahman ibn Auf. Does that make sense? So that's what we call al-ma'na shay al-urfi. In the urf al-nas, you haven't been with me like he's been with me. You're not a companion like he is. So know your place. But that doesn't mean you're not what? A companion in general. You are one of my what? One of my companions. But now let's come back to the hadith. So the hadith, it says what? It says لَعَلَّهُمْ أَصْحَابُهُ. Right? Perhaps those people who are the 70,000, they are what? His companions. Like which meaning? Which meaning? Al-Lughawi? The person you know but you really might not even like? Huh? Do you think it's that one? So perhaps, okay, let me put that meaning, we're going to insert that meaning instead of the word ashab. Perhaps they are those people that he knows but he doesn't like. Like Abu Lahab. No. Can't be Lughawi. You agree with me? طيب. لَعَلَّهُمْ أَصْحَابُهُ. Perhaps they are his companions, meaning the people who bet him and they believed in him And they died upon that. You like that one? You think it's that one? But that's all of them. All of them. All of us. So it's us. Why would they say ashabu? Why would they say what? Perhaps it's us. So then last but not least, لَعَلَّهُمْ أَصْحَابُهُ, meaning perhaps it is those people who walked with him and believed in him from day one or from early on in his mission. And they put in many years of companionship. They have more companionship than others do. What do you think? That's the one. It's the last one, the customary one. The customary one. So some of them who didn't have that suhbah are saying these people have more right to this fadl. Wazi ikhwan? And so that's how we answer the misconception. But this meaning that we generally use is salim. It's proper, it's correct. And this hadith doesn't what? Doesn't disprove it. Because why? There are three possible meanings, and the meaning in this hadith is what? The third. You follow me? Does it make sense? Like, all right, let's finish. So now, we notice that he mentioned the virtue, but he didn't mention why. What did they do? And the companions speculated. They said, perhaps they were the companions, perhaps they're the ones who did this, so they speculated. They offered different speculations. So when the Prophet came out, they said what? Please tell us, because we've been speculating, we don't know who they are. So the Prophet said, they are the ones who do not treat themselves with ruqyah. I'm sorry. They are the ones who do not what? Request. هُمُ الَّذِينَ لَا يَسْتَرْقُونَ. They don't request a ruqyah from what? From other people. They'll treat themselves, but they won't request it from what? From other people. هُمُ الَّذِينَ لَا يَسْتَرْقُونَ وَلَا يَكْتَوُونَ. And they don't treat their wounds with what? I gotta give these guys a little bit more time because it's getting to run out. All right. And they don't treat themselves with cauterization. Because one of the ways of treatment during the time of the Prophet ﷺ was when a person would be wounded, to make sure the wound would seal and heal, they would take heat and apply it. And the Prophet said that they don't do this. These people, these 70,000, they don't do this. They don't use cauterization, burning, coal, as a means to what? To treat wounds. Ajib, there's a lot of... Okay. Alright, mumtaz. Alright, so لا يسترقون ولا يكتوون وعلى ربهم. No, قبل هذا, something before that. ولا يتطيرون ولا يتطيرون. And they don't, how do I translate that? Let me see. I didn't like the way they translate. That's why I want to look at my translation. Let me find it. Okay. And they do not employ omens. They do not employ omens to influence what? To influence their decisions. So what they used to do in the time of the Prophet ﷺ is a person wants to go on a business trip. He's going to travel to Sham to trade. And he's doubting, should I go, should I not go? Should I go on this day or should I go on that day? Right? And he doesn't know what the qadr of Allah is going to be, what the destiny decree is going to be. So he uses something to kind of give him an indication. Okay? So he'll come out of his house, and if he sees a flock of birds, he'll do something to what? Do something to frighten them, so they'll fly off. If they fly to the right, he says, oh, this is a good sign.
Good luck.
Right. If they fly to the left, oh no, he goes inside, shuts his door, locks it closed, and sits down, he doesn't go. Right? That's what we call it tatayyur. They use omens. Right? They use omens. So the Prophet says they don't do this. They don't use omens to influence their decisions. And what's the jami'? What is the thing that combines all of these things? وَعَلَى رَبِّهِمْ يَتَوَكَّلُونَ. But instead of doing these things, they put their trust firmly in their Lord. They rely on Allah. So this is the quality of these muhaqqiqeen who will enter paradise without without hisab or adab, without reckoning or punishment, is that they do what? They have this quality of what? A tawakkul, of complete and total, utter dependence on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? And I just want to close one thing. When you had a question, Fadl Shaykh.
Yes, sir. does it have to be all three of them? Like if one had one of those two or one of those three?
Yeah, it would disqualify him. It would disqualify him. Because he's saying they're the ones who do this and this and this and al-jami' li kulli hada. And the thing that combines everything, or their motivation for that, their foundation in that is what? Putting their trust in their Lord. Instead of doing these things, they put their trust in their Lord. You follow me?
Is that since you know this thing or that?
Yeah, whoever achieves it has the hope that he'll be from that 70,000.
My question is, if someone didn't know those things.
Yeah, they did it before, and then they changed, they repented, and they fulfilled all of these. Then they would have hope, because the Prophet's basically saying that whoever does these things, and there would be no benefit in saying that if there was no hope for the one who, like you said, before knowing about the hadith, he did those things and he couldn't repent from it.
Or one of the Sahaba, he was wounded in the Habib in the Yuktub.
But the fact that the Prophet told him to do it as a treatment, that falls under the statement of the Prophet, he says, Ya ibadullah, tadawu. He says, oh slaves of Allah, seek what? Seek the cure. And there's no contradiction between that and saying, if you don't use cauterization, you'll be from what? The 70,000. He didn't say it's haram. He's just saying not doing it will give you what? Entitle you to what? A virtue. But that doesn't mean doing it is what? Is haram if it's a necessity, if it's darura. You follow what I'm saying? Alright, tayyib. So the last thing I want to mention as it relates to this this part of the hadith is that one of the things it teaches us is it encourages us, it motivates us to have absolute reliance on Allah, to have this tawakkul, right? To have this reliance on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And not any ordinary reliance, but a reliance where you're in doubt. You have a lot of reason to doubt. You have every reason to put your faith in something what? Material. Something created. And believe that it really can what? Bring about the benefit that you seek. You have every reason to believe that. And your faith is shaken that if you don't do this, you won't get what you need of benefit. When you're in that situation, and you have this tawakkul, this is the type of tawakkul that's being what? That's being referred to. A person is wounded and the wound just keeps opening and opening and opening. And he fears it might lead to his death, it might lead to what? Having to be amputated. At that time, most people are going to do what? Khalas, give me al-kay. Go ahead. So, to have that level of a tawakkul, this is what it takes to be what? Min muhaqqiqi at-Tawhid, from the people who what? Achieve at-Tawhid. And we have to understand that in our practical lives, there's a lot of temptation to depend on what? Al-khalq, to depend on the creation. And there's lots of reason to believe that they will what? Fulfill and take care of them. We can depend on them, we can rely on them for the things that they're capable of doing, and they'll fulfill it. But what really happens? What really happens is that sometimes they don't do it, they let us down, and they do that because of what? An-nisyan. Doesn't that happen? You ask someone to do something, and they don't do it. You need them to do it, and it's something they can do. It's within their capacity to do it, but they don't do it because of what? Forgetfulness. Doesn't that happen? And you rely on them, you depend on them. Hey man, I have to get picked up from school and get taken to work. And if I'm late again, my boss is going to, I'll be there. Don't worry about it. I'll be there 15 minutes early. And you come out of school and you wait and wait and wait. And the person doesn't turn up. And you call them. Where are you, man? You're supposed to pick me up. Oh, I totally forgot. I'm coming right now. Doesn't that happen? That's happened to all of us. Right? So they don't do what you ask them to do out of what? Nisyan. Sometimes they don't do it. They let you down because of inability. What we call it ajz. They just can't do it. You ask them to do something, and for whatever reason they can't do it because they're human, and humans have what? Limited capabilities. So you ask them to do something, they just can't do it. And sometimes you ask them to do something which normally they can do, and they don't do it or they can't do it because they have their own needs which supersede your need, or because some other circumstance came between them and doing what you asked them to do. But in all of these cases, they end up doing what? Letting you down. And then on the other hand, Allah. When you ask him for whatever you need, is he going to forget? وَمَا رَبُّكَ I'm sorry, وَمَا كَانَ رَبُّكَ نَسِيًّا. Your Lord doesn't forget, right? Is there ever going to be a time when he can't do it? Abadan. There's nothing he can't do, right? And is there ever going to be a time where circumstances will prevent him from doing what he wills? He controls the circumstances like he controls everything. So it makes perfect sense that we do what? We rely on him. But in many cases we don't, ya ikhwan. It's just human weakness, but we have to work to overcome that weakness and rely on Allah. And we shouldn't be the people who we could have relied upon Allah in the beginning by choice. We could have relied in the beginning by choice and we would have got what? Ajr. Perhaps we would have got the ajr mentioned in this hadith. But we turn to what? The creation, and they let us down. Because they forget, because they're unable or incapable, or because. And then we end up having to do what? Rely on Allah anyway. But now we're not relying by choice, we're relying by what? We're compelled. And we don't get what? We don't get the ajr. So this tawakkul is something we have to really work on it. We have to strive for it. Because that's that thing. That's that quality that if we can achieve it, it puts us what? In a different stratosphere. The stratosphere of who? The people who achieve, they actualize the Tawhid, and their reward is that they'll enter paradise without reckoning and without punishment. May Allah make us from them. Wa sallallahu wa sallam wa baraka ala Muhammad. Any questions? Going once? Going twice? Gone. Sallallahu wa sallam wa baraka ala Nabi Muhammad. See you guys next week, inshallah ta'ala. بارك الله فيك يا شيخنا الله يبارك فيك ويحفظك